So picture this. You plan a full year in advance a trip to Machu Picchu, one of the seven wonders of the world, only to arrive and the entire site is covered in fog. You can't see a thing. Now, this happens way more often than you might think, and it actually happened to our guest today, our founder, Nate Hake. But Nate made a decision just the night before that completely saved his experience at Machu Picchu, and he ended up getting those picture-perfect views that every visitor dreams of. How did he do it? Well, he's here today to tell us all about his experiences in Peru. So, Nate, I want to start with your story about visiting Machu Picchu.
So this was my second time in Machu Picchu. First time I went was 9 years ago, uneventful. This time, the night before, Clara and I, we get to Aguas Calientes, which is Machu Picchu base town. It is pouring rain. And I realized there's a good chance that it's going to be blocked by fog the next day. And the thing is, the last time I went, this wasn't as much of an issue because you would just wait to enter at the time that there wasn't fog. But now, since 2019, they have a whole bunch of very strict rules, and you have to buy a ticket months in advance that has your time to enter. Doesn't matter what the weather is. You got to go. So sure enough, the next morning we get up there, we go, we get to the viewpoint, and it's completely blocked by fog. If you're on YouTube, I'll put up a video right now, but you cannot see anything. And because the way Machu Picchu works, you can only go one way around a circuit. There's 10 different circuits. It's very complicated. I've got a whole video that talks about all of that. But basically, you can only go one way around the circuit and you can't go back. And because the viewpoint is at the start of the circuit that we had, we sat there for 3 hours, basically deciding hey, do we go down and visit the ruins, or do we just sit here and wait for it to clear? And it never really did clear there. But as you mentioned, the night before, I had found out that there's actually 1,000 last-minute tickets that they release if you're in Machu Picchu town for the next day. I found this out when I was on my phone at 9:15 at night. The office that sells these tickets closes at 10 p.m. So we rushed down there, and we got lucky enough that there was actually a ticket available for another circuit later in the day. And so although on that first ticket, if that's all we had was that first ticket, we just would not have gotten the iconic photo. But thankfully, we went back around, went to that second circuit, and then it had cleared by that point. And we got a really good viewpoint there. I don't want to make it seem either the photo's the only thing that matters. Let's be clear, you can still go down. You don't see the view of Machu Picchu with Huayna Picchu, which is the famous mountain behind it. So you would not get that iconic shot. And that's very typical during the rainy season, which is 6 months from October to the end of March, early April, that happens to people. So you don't get that view, but you can still go down into the ruins. And even if it's foggy, you're still kind of in this, it does give it this sort of mysticism as well. So I don't want to make it seem like the only thing that matters is the photo. But for a lot of people, including us, you really want the photo. And yeah, if we hadn't booked that second ticket, we just wouldn't have got to see it. And a lot of the other people that were standing there next to us for those hours, that they just never really got that photo after their whole Peru trip.
Yeah, and so you said that you booked your original ticket for Circuit 2B, which is kind of the more iconic route, right? And you did that almost a year in advance. Is that correct?
So in 2019, Machu Picchu instituted this circuit system. And it's because of over-tourism. It's such a popular site. So many people go that they had to kind of control it so that the net effect of so many people on the site degrades sort of this archaeological site. And so I understand why they did that. However, the circuits are very complicated. Not all of them have the viewpoint of Machu Picchu. And also, not all of them go into the lower rooms. And so there's actually only one, which is 2B, that both has a viewpoint and actually goes down into the site itself on the same circuit. And so that's the most popular ticket. It's the hardest one to get. It sells out the farthest in advance. I booked it many months in advance. If you're going in the high season, during the Northern Hemisphere summer, then yeah, you would ideally want to try to book that way in advance. I didn't think about booking a second ticket, but I would recommend that, if you see one available. And if you don't, you have those 1,000 last-minute tickets available in the town. I've got a whole video called How Not to Fail Machu Picchu on YouTube. So if you're planning a trip, you can go, I talk about all the different circuits, all the different things. You really got to plan for it. They have a ton of rules, and they're really strict. They give you 30 minutes past that entry time, and then if you're later than that, they just don't let you in.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a destination where you really have to thoroughly plan it ahead of time. But then when you plan something like that so far ahead, it's you don't really think about how just the weather itself could totally throw your plans for a loop at the last second. And so you said that you got that last second day before ticket from the cultural center in Aguascalientes, which is Machu Picchu town. So obviously that's a huge reason to stay there in that town the day before you go to Machu Picchu. But maybe you could tell us a little bit more about why you recommend staying in Aguascalientes.
Yeah. So Machu Picchu is like deep in the Andes, and that's why the Spanish never got there. That's why it's such a well-preserved site compared to a lot of other sites. And in order to get there, you have to first, most people would start in the city of Cusco, which is the nearest major city. And some people stay in Cusco, and then just do it as a day trip. But it's a very, very long day trip because you have to go 2 hours to Ollantaytambo, which is a town in the Sacred Valley. Then you have to take a train from there about an hour and a half to Machu Picchu town. And then you have to take a bus that's about an hour that will take you up to the top of the entrance for Machu Picchu. And this, by the way, is assuming that you're not doing like one of the organized treks like the Inca Trail or something. That's a different type of trip. And this is just for the majority of visitors who are just kind of visiting and staying in hotels. So you could stay in any of those places along the way. You could stay in Cusco and do it as a day trip. And some people do, but my goodness, it's like 6 hours there, 6 hours back.
It's a long day.
And you're gonna get there in the middle of the day when like the sun is at the harshest. If you care about photos, the contrast will be highest. It's not ideal. You could stay in the Sacred Valley and you could take a train up. We later stayed in another hotel called Tombo del Inca that actually has a train directly from the hotel. Or you could do what we did, and this is what I would recommend for most people, which is just go up and spend a night in Aguascalientes. It's this really cool little, like almost like a mining town or a ramshackle, like little company town just built in a very narrow valley between some mountains right near Machu Picchu. And it's got a river running through it. It's very picturesque. The only reason it exists is to service tourists. There's like not really any cars. The only roads there are for the buses that will take you up. And we stayed in a hotel called Haya Hotel, which is really nice. It was, it was like $100 and some odd a night. I can't remember. I did a whole video and a review of it. But they've got all kinds of different hotels in Aguascalientes. And then that way you can get up early and you can go. They say that you're supposed to go in the morning to get the best views, but of course there's also a good risk of fog. And it also does rain in the afternoon, so it's always a gamble no matter how you do it. So that's why I think having a backup is really good. But I would definitely recommend staying in Aguascalientes if you can. If not, the Sacred Valley, like Ollantaytambo, is also a good choice. I've got a whole video and a whole guide on travellemming.com about where to stay for Machu Picchu that can help you kind of plan your whole trip.
Yeah, and in that hotel review guide of the Haya Boutique Hotel, you show the views overlooking the river through the town. It looks so gorgeous there. Nate actually gives the number of his hotel room so you can book it and request that exact room if you want when you stay there. But again, check out the Where to Stay in Machu Picchu guide on Travel Lemming after this. Super detailed, super helpful. Thanks for touching on that for a moment. Now, a big thing that you mentioned in your Cusco videos was that altitude sickness was a very real thing for you. And you actually were given oxygen to help you get acclimated during one of your first nights in Cusco, which is a city over 11,000 feet. To put it in perspective, Denver is a little over 5,000. So it's twice the altitude of Denver. I get headaches just by going to Denver. So I can only imagine what a big change that would be for your body. So tell us a little bit about your initial struggle to adapt to that.
Yeah, so Cusco is, as I mentioned, is the main sort of city in the Andes. It was historically the center of the Inca Empire. The Incas literally used Cusco as like an administrative center, and then they had states that went out from every direction around it. So it's kind of like Washington, D.C., where it had this like administrative non-state status, and they ran the empire from Cusco. And so a lot of the history is in Cusco. Apart from Machu Picchu, you've got so many sites there. Like I definitely recommend spending some time in Cusco. It's also where the nearest airport is to get you to Machu Picchu. But as you mentioned, it's at really high elevation, 11,150 feet, which is, twice the height of Denver. Most people will get altitude sickness of some form. Most people will feel it if you're coming from sea level. And if you did like we did, we came from Lima, which is on the Pacific Ocean, so directly at sea level, all the way up. And the first time I visited Cusco many years ago when I was younger, I didn't feel it. And so I was just kind of a little arrogant about it this time. And I got really uncomfortable headache, was just like not feeling good. The hotel I was staying at, Palacio del Inca was the name. It's like a really cool luxury hotel. And they actually had, I talked to one of the staff members there and like, oh, we have an oxygen service. We'll send oxygen to your room. And sure enough, they did. A guy came up with an oxygen tank and he put it on me. And I felt a little bit like an old man there, which I am at this point. And the oxygen definitely made me feel better. But yeah, you've got to acclimate to that elevation. And this is why I recommend in my guides that I think if I had to do it over again, I would have, a lot of people plan like the classic trip to Peru is basically Cusco, the Sacred Valley, and Machu Picchu. I would start in the Sacred Valley, which is about at 9,000 feet, because actually Cusco is higher than both the Sacred Valley and Machu Picchu, which is around like 8,000 feet. So I would start in the Sacred Valley, then do Machu Picchu, then end in Cusco at the point that you've already spent time, because you need time to acclimate to that elevation.
And you said even some of the hotels, they'll like pump oxygen.
Yeah, so another
oxygen,
hotel we stayed at, the JW Marriott El Convento Cusco. Very cool hotel. It's in this like, everything in Cusco is like so historic because it goes back thousands of years. But this particular site is in a renovated Spanish Augustinian convent. And they actually pump oxygen into the rooms. They do that, and the Monasterio by Belmont, which are like two of the highest end hotels there, do that. And then several of the other hotels like Palacio del Inca will bring the service to you. If you're not staying in those luxury hotels, you can also get oxygen in pharmacies. Like every pharmacy is selling this there. There are some medications that you can take that are supposed to help with this. I'm not going to name them because I don't feel comfortable giving medical advice, but like know that exists. And some people find that helps. The most important thing is not to like push yourself too hard, because so many people, they want to see everything. They want to pack it all in. Peru's big, it's spread out, and people get this idea that they can do everything in 7 days or something. And they don't leave enough time to acclimate. Like you really should just take a day when you're at elevation and not have too many plans so that you can let kind of down.
Absolutely, yeah. And so if altitude sickness is something that you're worried about, if you're planning a trip to Peru, there are ways to combat it and definitely ways to make yourself feel a little better during that time. And Nate talks about this in his video on the top tips to know before you visit Peru. He has 21 tips in that episode, not just about altitude sickness. So check that out after this as well. He's got lots of really valuable information to make the most of your trip. So how did it feel navigating the tourist attractions during your time in the Andes, especially the ones that involve like a lot of walking and climbing?
I think this is a common thing. I think a lot of people think that Peru is like a trekking destination. And because it is true that if you go to like YouTube, you will see a lot of trekking content. And that absolutely exists. Like the Inca Trail is the most famous one. There are several different trails that people do where they will go and they'll actually hike their way through Machu Picchu and all of these other historic sites in the area. And if that's something you want to do, like by all means, it's a world-class hiking destination. But that said, the official like multi-day hikes are like less than 5% of the visitors to Machu Picchu. So 95% are not doing that. And so I think it's important. I've already had some discussions with some readers to like emphasize that like you can visit all of these places with no trekking and honestly with like very minimal hiking. Like even there's some stairs like at the viewpoint at Machu Picchu, and even those you could avoid if you didn't want to get the viewpoint. And some of the other sites also have like you can go down and there's maybe there's some steep stairs and things, and you definitely do feel that at elevation, but it's not like hiking. Like there are plenty of hikes. Plenty of really good hikes. And last time on my first trip, I did a lot of like really serious hikes. I hiked Mount Machu Picchu and I did a bunch of that. But you don't have to do hiking. And I think that's really important to remember. The sites themselves, I mean, look, it's very touristy, obviously. Like these are sites that are filled with people. People are coming from around the world. Like it is a world-class destination. Machu Picchu is on, it's up there with the pyramids or the Colosseum in terms of major sites. And Peru has a very well-developed tourism industry. So there's lots of infrastructure, no matter everything from budget backpackers to luxury travelers. Like you have options and like they are set up for it for every single like budget level and every single level of activity. It is by far the most developed and the most modernized tourism industry in all of South America. So I think that, if you're someone who wants to do the hiking, great. But if not, like Peru is a very accessible destination.
That's so good to know. I know so many people who are not big hikers and who talk about Peru as if it's just not cut out for them because it kind of does have that facade of just being a trekking destination. So it's great to know that no matter what activity level you're at, no matter your age, you can still manage it.
Yeah, you have to be able to manage the elevation. Like that's
Right.
so, it's if you're at if you're if you're at the level where you need to talk to your doctor about the elevation, that is a concern, but the physical activity you could manage relatively little. There are a lot of hills like within Cusco and smaller hills and walking around, but if you're reasonably able to like climb up and down staircases and things, you should be able to manage it.
All right, very good to know. We've been referring to all these videos throughout the podcast so far. Nate actually has 10 different Peru videos that he made after his month-long trip there. And I'm going to put a link down below to a playlist of all those videos. He also has 10 different guides on travellemming.com. So you can just type in Peru, Cusco, Lima, wherever you're headed or wherever you're interested in going in Peru. Type that in your favorite search engine, travellemming.com, and you will be able to find those there. All right, so moving right along. Now I want to bring us back down to sea level. So at the very start of your trip, Nate, you were in Lima. And Lima is the capital city. It's massive. It's even bigger than Paris and London, which I did not know before watching your video on it. And you said that most visitors don't spend more than a night there before they move on to the more famous sites like Machu Picchu. But you stayed there for 2 weeks in Lima, and you made a video called Don't Skip Lima, along with all the tips you should know before you go. So what are a few reasons that you found that Lima was so worthwhile?
Lima it's almost 10 million people, as I said, so it's more populous than London. It's got a huge number of neighborhoods. So to paint a picture for you, it's set along the Pacific coast. It's almost like a completely different trip in a lot of ways than the Andes destinations that we've been talking about today. It's set in a desert, arid area along the coast, and it's particularly famous for these cliffs. A lot of them run along the neighborhood Miraflores. They're called the Cliffs of Miraflores. They're these giant cliffs. I'll put it up on YouTube for you to see. And it's just, they run all along the coast of the city, and the city's sort of built up several stories on the side of these dramatic cliffs. And they've got a boardwalk that runs along the Miraflores Malecon, it's called. And so it's like such a wonderful place to like take a walk and around sunset or so, and you've just got the sun setting over the Pacific Ocean. It gives off very like California vibes. If you've kind of gone anywhere along like Big Sur, the Pacific Coast Highway, any of that, like it's kind of the same vibes, but it's within the city itself. And so that's a must see for sure. But then beyond that, there's actually a lot of really interesting history in Lima. Like Lima has a ton of history behind it. They actually have pyramids. They call them huacas within the city. So the most famous one is Huaca Poc-Llana. And I think I said that right. In my YouTube videos, I forgot that double L is like said as a Y in Spanish, which I should know because I speak Spanish every day. But I messed that up and I got a bunch of Peruvians calling me out. So Huaca Poc-Llana. And that is in the middle of Miraflores. It's the most popular one because that's the tourist neighborhood and it is really where you should stay. But it's like you go up on this adobe pyramid that they've made. These were pre-Inca, like way before Inca societies that would make these pyramids by pressing together adobe clay into like little bricks. And then they would just stack up the bricks. They did not even use mortar or anything. They would just kind of like stack them all up and they would make these pyramids. And there are dozens of these things all around, in and around Lima. And we actually went to like another one where we were the only people at this other pyramid that was less popular. But that's a really cool site. Like I don't know anywhere else in the world other than Giza and Cairo where you can like be on a pyramid and be staring out over a city skyline like that. They've got a ton of world-class museums in Lima, like the Larco Museum in particular. It has a ton of pre-Columbian artifacts. It's a really beautiful museum. They've got a museum with a ton of gold and arms. Like they've got a ton of like military arms from around the world there. Those are two particularly good ones. They've got a historic center that although the areas around, like I wouldn't stay there because at night the areas around it aren't honestly like the best. But during the day, you should go because it's got a beautiful plaza. Like it really reminds me of like the Zocalo in Mexico City where you've got this like huge Spanish colonial plaza. They've got tons of beautiful buildings. The architecture is incredible. And of course, there's the food, they're very famous for ceviche. They've got really unique sort of food there. And it's a lot of it is different than the food that you find up in the Andes. So I just think I think Lima, I've been to pretty much all the major cities in South America. I spent a lot of time in South America. As longtime followers know, Clara, my partner, is from Argentina, so we spent a lot of time here. And I think Lima is the best of the big cities. Maybe you could argue for Rio, but like Rio has some safety issues, and in Lima, it felt like a lot more comfortable compared to that. I think it's really good for like culture, city, all that, and I think it makes a really nice counterbalance to the Sacred Valley in Cusco, which is almost like a totally different destination. So I feel like so many people, you have to fly through Lima. Like there's only a handful of international flights to Cusco, and they all pretty much go to like Colombia or other places. Like I don't think there are any to the United States. So most international visitors have to come through Lima. And a lot of people, they just either connect straight through to Cusco or they stay at the airport. And I think that's a mistake. Like I think you should spend at least 2 nights there and at least see, the cliffs, should at least see the historic center. And they've got a ton more to do. They've got a water park there that you can go to with like all these Peruvian families where they have this like water that like all these water fountains and like fair rides and things. And it's like a really unique experience. And that's where most Peruvians live, is in Lima and in the sort of surrounding area. Like that's the population center. And you got to fly there anyway. I just think it's a shame that so many people skip it because it is such a lovely city. And I understand, like, it is not going to be like Machu Picchu, Cusco, the Sacred Valley. Yeah, that's probably going to be your first photos that you post after your trip. But don't sleep on Lima. Like, stay there.
Yeah, the history is what absolutely blows me away. And like, for example, the Incan civilization was at the height of its time, 600 years ago? And that Huaca Pucllana that you talk about, I did some research on it, and it's 1,500 years old. So it's
well
so much
before
older.
The Incas. Yeah.
Right. And it's right in the middle of modern apartment buildings, banks, grocery stores. And the photos that you put up of it, it just looks so wild to me. And they built these things to be earthquake proof and just pieced all the little blocks, the adobe blocks together without any mortar or anything, right? So it blows my mind that they could do this kind of thing.
Yeah, there are so many pre-Columbian societies. Everybody thinks about the Incas because, of course, the Incas were the biggest of the civilizations in South America. They built this incredible empire, and honestly, the Incas were only really around for like a couple hundred years, like a pretty small period of time. They built this really big empire really quickly, and then the Spanish came, and there's a long history. There was the Inca Civil War and all these different things that sort of led to the demise of the Incas. But it's incredible, and the history is so unique. So you can learn about all the pre-Inca civilizations in a lot of these museums, and there are many, many of them. And also in Cusco as well. Cusco was founded by the Quilchi people before the Incas. And in that JW Marriott hotel that I stayed in, when they were doing the renovations, they actually found like burial sites from the Quilchi people, like in the basement. And because all of Cusco is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, so it's protected, they had to bring in like UNESCO inspectors to preserve the site, and they like turned it into, they have like 2 museums in the basement of this hotel. And everything's just kind of like that in Peru. Like there's like everywhere you walk, you don't even know how much history is below your feet. And it's true across the entire country. Yeah, I love learning about the history. The Incas are wild as well. They built a civilization across such a huge expanse of territory, and they had such a big developed road network. But did you know that they never invented the wheel? They never had the wheel. They used like a lot of the pack animals. They would use like the vicuñas, the llamas. They would use them as pack animals to carry stuff around. And that's kind of how they did it. But they never invented the wheel. They did not have a written language. They would use these like little rope things called quipas as a way of record keeping, but they did not have a written language. They also did not have a traditional monetary system. That it was more like a barter sort of society. Like you would just kind of like exchange stuff. And they're one of only like a half dozen, quote unquote, pristine civilizations. And that the Incas in the whole sort of area. And the point of that, the pristine civilizations are civilizations that grew up independent of other civilizations. So, other examples would be like ancient China, ancient India. And so it means because they weren't influenced by external forces because of the geography of South America, which is basically an island because the Darien Gap is almost impassable. They developed a very unique and very different culture. It's just weird to think you could build such a huge civilization with massive road networks and you didn't even invent the wheel,
Yeah. Gosh, that's so interesting. And I love that you kind of give a little bit of a history lesson in your videos too. I think those are all things that are so important to know before you go, because to just show up in a country with so much history blindly like that, not the best idea. So thank you so much for touching a little bit on the history of those empires there. So after Lima, you went to Cusco, which you've talked about this a little bit, how you stayed at the Palacio del Inca Hotel. And it's located in this 500-year-old mansion with real Inca stone walls still within the hotel. And it's across from the Coricancha, which was the Incan temple of the sun, once designated as the center of the Inca Empire. So how much history can you possibly get in one place? I would love it if you could tell us a little bit about the highlights of that hotel stay and just your time in Cusco in general.
Yeah, so this is the same hotel where I got that elevation sickness and they gave me oxygen, by the way.
Yes.
So I think the most important historical site in Cusco, and there are a lot of them, but the most important is Coricancha and the Church of Santo Domingo. So Coricancha, and it's spelled like 7 different ways, but it was the Incas, as you say, it was the temple to the sun. They built it to the god Inti, which is the sun god, and it was covered head to toe in gold, like in gold, silver, like the walls were just supposed to be covered with like sheets of gold. And this was the center of the empire, like the literal center of the Inca Empire, and they kind of ran it from there. And then the Spanish came along, a Spanish conquistador named Francisco Pizarro came in. It gets really complicated, and there's actually, I've learned since I posted the videos that among Peruvians, there is some controversy about the history because there was like, the Spanish kind of turned some of the Incas against each other. But basically, there was this like famous ransom for the Inca ruler at the time where they like gave a bunch of the gold over the Spanish, and then the Spanish just came and killed them all and took the gold anyway. At the end of the day, the Spanish came in, they tore down a lot of that. They took out all the gold. Some of it's still in Cusco, but a lot of it got melted down and sent back to Spain. And then they turned it into the Church of Santo Domingo, which is like more of a traditional Spanish colonial church that you can go in there. And they still have some of the original Inca walls. Part of that complex, the conquistador, Francisco Pizarro, decided was going to be his mansion. And so he turned it into a mansion. And that is now a 5-star hotel, Palacio del Inca. So for many years afterwards, it was like a Spanish mansion. Then later there was an earthquake, kind of fell in disrepair, and then it was bought by a hotel group, and they've turned it into this like 5-star luxury hotel. They preserved a ton of the original history. A lot of the walls downstairs are actually original Inca walls. And Inca walls are so interesting because they just like fit the stones together. They mostly did not use mortar, but they would cut it like so precisely. You cannot slip a piece of paper between the stones because they were so good at cutting these stones. And then there's a lot of other Spanish colonial artworks. It's got this beautiful courtyard, and they've got an alpaca named Inti, who is named after the sun god, who hangs out there when you have breakfast in the courtyard. I think Palacio del Inca would be my favorite hotel in Cusco, particularly like for couples or anyone who wants like an experiential hotel. It's one of the most unique hotels I've ever stayed in. Like, I don't know how many times you can say you're staying in a place that's literally part of an Inca temple. So that was super cool. I've got an entire video, like a half-hour video, where we talk all about the stay and about me taking that oxygen. They do classes, they do pisco sour classes and all sorts of fun stuff. And there's lots of video of Inti the alpaca. So if nothing else, you should watch it.
Oh, I love Inti. The Inti content, I live for it. And the pisco sour class, that was part of, the hotel offers experiences, right? Can you tell us what a pisco sour is for those who don't know?
Oh, you're putting me on the spot. How much did I pay attention in the class and how much did I drink pisco, I guess is
you drank it more than you paid attention
question.
to the ingredients.
Remember also the alcohol hits you harder at elevation.
Oh, yeah.
Because you process it more. So a pisco sour it's actually not even at all from Cusco. Like it originated, I think, from Lima. A pisco sour is basically like a famous Peruvian cocktail that has like pisco, lime juice, egg whites, and bitters. The egg whites are kind of what, and the pisco gives it like its unique flavor. You'll see it everywhere. Like if you're going to Peru, like you're going to drink pisco sours, just like if you're going to Mexico, you're going to be drinking margaritas. And if you go to Cuba, you're going to be drinking mojitos. Like it's just kind of one of the part of the, assuming that you drink alcohol at all, like that it is a must do while you're there. And so we actually stayed at 3 different hotels that had pisco sour classes. And so we were kind of sick of it by the end of it, but it's quite a common thing there.
So that hotel is next to a bunch of the different sites that are on the Boleto Turistico, which I want to talk about next. So the Boleto Turistico, it's a 10-day multi-site pass that allows entry into 16 different tourist sites within Cusco and the Sacred Valley, all for under $50 USD, which is insane to me. It's so cheap. And you went to 13 of these 16 sites. So what were the highlights? What were the skippable ones? Tell us a little bit about those tourist sites.
Yeah, so this ticket, it's like you have to get it to go to all of the secondary sites. So this is separate from Machu Picchu. You don't have to buy this in advance. You can buy it at the entrance to any of the 16 sites, and then it's good for 10 days. It covers many sites in Cusco and the surrounding Sacred Valley. And some of those sites are like, I think, must visits. In particular, the ruins at Ollantaytambo, I think, are the most impressive ruins in the Sacred Valley after Machu Picchu. It's like these giant staircases that go up along the side of a hill with this beautiful town down below. That's also the town where you take the train to Machu Picchu. The terraces at Marais, this is where the Incas actually, they were very sophisticated agriculturally, and they would like had this like almost laboratory where they would test out different crop varieties, and they would propagate the ones that worked through their empire. And it's these terraces that are like shaped like as a nod to fertility. Those are really cool. The ruins at Chinchero up on a hillside, also really cool. Within Cusco itself, the main archaeological zone is just outside of the city center. So Cusco's set in a valley. You climb up kind of from the historic center up over a hill. You can actually walk there from the Cusco Historic Center to the Sexy Human archaeological site. It's spelled like sexy woman. You're supposed to say it like sexy human. And this archaeological site has 4 different sites within it that are each separate stamps within that. I've got a whole video on Cusco that talks all about it, but they're really cool. There's one that's like a fortress up on the side of the hill, another called Kenko, where you kind of go through some rocks. So those are all worth doing. In addition, there's a couple that I missed down to the south because they're a couple hours away from Cusco. Pazac is the one that I most regret having missed. We just didn't manage to fit it in. And then within Cusco, there's a bunch of sites on that ticket. There are a couple of museums. The museums, I would say, are interesting if you want to learn about history. I would say the museums in Cusco are not like, there are better museums in Lima, first off. And the ones that are on the ticket, the best one, if you only go to one, I would go to the Regional Historic Museum. That talks about the history of Cusco through the whole period there. They have the famous Placa del Sol, which is like a famous piece of gold that was actually in the Smithsonian until recently when it was sent back to Cusco. And it's actually like the seal of the city. So that's there. That's a good one. They've got this show that you can go to at the Center for like Native Art. And they put on like a dance show where they do traditional local dance and music, like flute, string instruments, things like this. That's included as part of this ticket. So I went to that. I thought that was really cool. There are a couple smaller museums. I talk about this in the video. If you want to know which ones to go and which ones to skip, there are a couple smaller museums that we went to and are fine, but if you're pressed on time, are not the most important ones. So I would go to the archaeological zone and the Regional Historic Museum kind of is the priority. And then you've got the Plaza Mayor, you've got other sites. There's a lot to do in Cusco. You need at least 2 days for Cusco, and that's apart from acclimation.
Yeah, you also mentioned in your video a couple spots that are not on the ticket that you also think are worthwhile, which you can check those out in the video. But the Boleto Turistico as a whole, it's a must get, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think unless you only want to do Machu Picchu, like you need this.
Gotta get it. Okay, good to know. So obviously, with everything that we've been discussing, there's a lot to take in on Peru, and it might seem a little bit overwhelming to plan a trip. But you actually made a realistic 10-day Peru itinerary video. And I thought it was super helpful and really just to the point, tells you exactly what you need to do for a 10-day trip there. So tell us a little bit more about that video.
Yeah, so if you're overwhelmed, I've basically planned it all for you. It's the perfect, I think, classic first time trip to Peru. And I want to be clear, there's a lot more to Peru that we haven't talked about. On my last trip, I went to Lake Titicaca and Puno. I want to go back and go to the Amazon. There's a lot more. But for the main sites in Peru, Cusco, the Sacred Valley, Machu Picchu, and I think you should include Lima in there. I've laid it all out in 10 days. It's a realistic itinerary, including a day that you can acclimate in. And you could literally just go and follow this itinerary, and I think you'll have a really good experience. Like, I've spent now almost 2 months total in Peru across my 2 trips. I've done every single thing on this itinerary. So I've got the video that you mentioned where I walk through the whole thing. But then I actually have a written guide on travellemming.com. So you can just search Peru itinerary travel lemming, and you'll find that on whatever your favorite search engine is. And that guide has everything you need. It's got links to hotels, and I've got hotels for every luxury mid-range budget at every single stop. It's got talks about what circuits to buy for Machu Picchu, what tickets you need, Like you pretty much, I've got 10 different guides to Peru, written guides on travel, and we got 10 videos. But if you only have time for one, I would watch that Peru itinerary video, and you could just follow my itinerary. And that's, that I think is a pretty foolproof introduction to Peru. You'll get all the must-sees, all the main sites, and it's done in a proper way where you're managing the elevation, you're kind of taking everything in. There's also some unique hidden gems that I put in there as well. So again, Peru itinerary, Travel Lemming, I'll just take all the work out of it for you. Or if you're one of those people who like, Nate, I don't want you to plan it for me. I want to plan my own special trip. I've got 5 hours of videos in that playlist that will link down below, and 10 guides and lots of different options for you to consider. So if you want to go to Peru, I spent a month there creating all this content, and then I've come back and spent the entirety of January pretty much putting together all this content to help our readers. So just go search Travel Lemming.
Well, there you go. Nate's planned your whole trip for you. All right. Well, that is all for today, folks. Remember that Nate has those 10 incredibly detailed videos of his travels through Peru that go into much further detail than we did here today on the podcast. So after this, go ahead and click on the link in the show notes below, or head to the Travel Lemming YouTube channel for all of those videos. And for the written version of Nate's Where to Stay guides for Lima, Cusco, Machu Picchu, visit travellemming.com. Type in Peru in the search bar and you'll find those there. If you enjoyed the show today, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, leave us a 5-star rating, and mean the world to us. All right, that's everything for today. We'll see you next time on the Travel Lemming Podcast.